Hello and welcome to High Rise AI. This is a conversation on how AI is transforming how commercial real estate buildings operate. We do want to keep this very grounded in how they operate today as we envision a future of a more automated, safe, secure, even carbon efficient world in the built environment. So we're going to be diving deep into some of those use case examples and then wrap up today with maybe a little bit of like a buyer's guide to help people be prepared to ask the right questions as they continue their smart building journey. So my name is Chad Flores. I'm the VP of Product from Cohesion, and I'm joined today by two incredible leaders in our space, Deepak Upadya from Moii AI, and of course, Tyler Vermette from Avuity. Let's just start off with a few introductions so you can share a little bit about yourself and your company. Deepak, do you mind starting off today?
Sure, Chad, and thank you for having us here. And this is a great topic. We started Moy 4 years ago with the idea of contextualizing visual data. There are about 1 billion plus cameras in the world. The amount of data that's generated off cameras far exceeds the data in the internet today, the entire internet today. And that whole piece of stream of data is untapped. So we started off with the vision to basically contextualize this data and basically focus on the analytics of this data. The hardware is already there. People have spent millions on cameras and systems that fit them. What is missing is that intelligence layer to connect. And that's been our focus at Moy, and working with commercial real estate, which is by far, if not the highest, one of the highest incubators of cameras outside industrial. There is so much value to be generated. So we've started working with basic ideas, but then it eventually becomes into an entire program to make a building smart. Because once you get the gift of sight, you go a level up on intelligence. If you didn't have the gift of sight, you're just guessing. It's like a blind man. So that's what we do. And again, great. And looking forward to this conversation today.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. Tyler.
Thanks for having me, Chad. Deepak, great to be here with you. My name is Tyler Vermette. I lead the sales and operations at Avuity. We've been around about 14 years and really focus on, simply put, actions and insights for corporate real estate leaders and their teams. We work in the investor landlord space as well, a little bit, but primarily inside the occupier suite to really start to understand how space is used, what decisions can be made, and ultimately at the end of the day, how does the employee experience look, hopefully relative to productivity within those environments. So we use a variety of different inputs, from proprietary sensors on occupancy, presence, as well as connecting to Wi-Fi and general infrastructure within buildings. And really putting our main focus into developing a lot of different AI tools and LLMs and ultimately agents to better help our customer success teams and also those workplace and real estate teams provide answers they need. And I think we can say outcomes is probably the biggest focus where we're starting to see everything go back to. It's don't attack the building just with technology, attack the problem within the building and then add technology to it. So I think that's where the really good conversations ending the year leading into 26 are happening right now.
Great. Thank you. Happy to have you here. And of course, myself from Cohesion. In case you didn't know, Cohesion is a smart buildings platform. We have applications that serve so many different use cases, from security to smart experience and maintenance within the commercial real estate space and workplaces. And then, of course, we have a data platform called Savvy. We've connected to both of these fantastic leaders of products today. And so let's dive in. Let's talk some shop here. I'd love to start the conversation with our most transformational use cases here in technology and in the real estate industry, right? So if you think about the year in review, 2025, physical security has been really a hot button issue across the country. So just starting with our most kind of mission critical use cases here, what are you seeing in security, right? Whether it's intrusion detection or emergency egress monitoring. What role do you see smart buildings playing in unlocking a future of a more safe environment to be in? Let's maybe start with Deepak here.
Sure. Yeah. Security has taken front place because of many unfortunate incidents that have happened in downtown areas, gun violence and similar incidents, riots, and so on. What we've seen in 2025 is two things. One is the ability to make manpower more efficient. They do spend a lot on security guards, but security guards can only be in one place at a time. And if you want more coverage, you just have to directly spend on more security guards. What AI is able to do is able to change that equation by saying, okay, you have an X amount of space. You don't need four guards, although math dictates that you should, but maybe you should just do one card and you equip the person with AI. So that's one trend that we are seeing in terms of ROI, because that's real money that is saved by building owners. With AI now replacing the activity on cameras, basically working on real-time detection of any sort of anomaly and alerting that immediately to a person on site or a remote monitoring center, makes this whole thing more efficient. The second thing that we're seeing is really related to the technology being connected to many of the systems that already exist in the building. For example, if you did see an incident, what if you could talk to the access control system directly? What if you could talk to another intermediate system that could make a decision which would potentially save lives because it would cut down the reaction time significantly? Although that is not mainstream today, we've had a lot of interest from customers to say, can we, for example, shut down certain entrances when certain events are seen? And just to make sure that by the time a human reviews this, you already have put something in place. So between these two, the level of automation and the level of efficiency, we're seeing a lot of interest in technology which relate to cameras as they stand. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's possible today, right? Being able to review the feed, classify any of these
Hmm.
incident events, right? And
Hmm.
then immediately make that available to a smart building platform to
Hmm.
distribute that message to the right people, right? I feel like one of the big pushbacks in our industry is that connecting all our system just creates an opportunity for more noise. But I actually think that's not what we should be worrying about. A truly smart system can appropriately classify these events,
Hmm.
categorizing these events with machine learning classifiers and things like that, and provide the right people with the most prioritized alerts in near real time. So I think that we need to be reevaluating how we think of our security infrastructure and leveraging everything that's available to us, especially when, whether it's poor weather events or shootings and other, terrible tragic events are at
I
play
mean, this
here.
is so it is just to add to there. We My background, I've come from the automotive world, right? So in the automotive world, we have thousands of sensors in a car, and all of it is autonomously doing many things that people don't know. And it took a while to get there. And things like emergency braking, things like automated cruise control, lane detection, avoidance. These are autonomous systems that it took a while for people to gain trust into it. But there's always a possibility of taking baby steps to get there.
Yeah.
But I think the time is now opportune, like you said, where all the pieces are coming together, and the people who take advantage of this would win first because they will be ahead of everybody else.
Yeah. And Tyler, there's always going to be these blind spots within a building as well, right? Buildings, depending on the portfolio or the industry that's really supporting the building, if it's a manufacturing space, right? Healthcare, hospitality, IoT can always provide a better security posture for shedding light and adding a detection layer, a live feed into some of those blind spots. I don't know if you want to speak to maybe a few examples where you've seen that be the case.
I think you have to think about the asset class, right? So there's not one box. Corporate campus in Texas is very different than a high-rise building in New York City or obviously where you are in Finland, Deepak, like some of those smaller low-rise buildings. So we have a lot of different use cases. So I'll go back to what you said before. The main faction is, can you build a platform autonomously to plug in different products that might work in different use cases across those different areas? And to your point, seeing some of the instances where you have these large campuses, which if there is, the technology in place, which actually can identify from a sound perspective, a gunshot that would automate the building to shut off those different zones or those different doors, even to the fact of actually shutting different gates at different campuses. So I think that there's a lot of places where you do have areas of opportunity, which, whether it be enhanced lighting for people in the dark who are walking that are actually people motioned, that actually the lumens get brighter as they walk by. There's a variety of different small use cases that I think can both create safety, but also we always talk about the experience. How does somebody feel within those different systematic approaches, and how does it look to be a person who might be going to honestly a building in maybe it's not the greatest neighborhood, right? But it is a Class A building, but getting the parking garage is a bit of a challenge. So those are real life instances, which, we saw a lot of those through COVID that have happened in San Francisco and Seattle. There's been a lot of, I would call it change management since then in how these building owners have had to operate and where they've ultimately had to pivot spend both on security and also different systems that might lean away from some of their past traditional budgeting exercises.
Yeah. One of my favorite things about working in the IoT space is how flexible and immediate and quick these deployments can be. So if you are, feeling concerned about a particular part of your building and you want to sort of shift your security posture to covering, right, a new parking lot or another wing of the building where maybe a business unit has moved or you have a new internal server room sort of space, you can really quickly adjust where your sensors are to close that gap within your security posture. So it is a pretty flexible world when it comes to both your video sources as well as other sort of supporting IoT sources across a building. I think all of these data feeds are so essential to the downstream sort of security, and then we'll sort of pivot here into talking about energy and use cases that we're seeing in the built environment, right? So actually a lot of these methods of detection and monitoring, right, can be very similar across segments like office and education, manufacturing, but one that'll have a lot of many different requirements is energy, right? Your runtime schedules for a BAS system within an office building will look a lot different if you're, say, in hospitality or supporting a data center or have it very much dialed in for a large healthcare system or hospital. So really a lot of those use cases around demand-based HVAC or dynamic climate adjustments that we're seeing in AI-driven or smart building asks from our industry are all dependent on real-time feeds. So I'd love to hear, Deepak, how do we see real-time video feeds contributing to things like energy savings, which is a priority globally here in the built environment?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very important topic going forward. I think not only does it come under building management and cost reductions, but also sustainability goals, right, for buildings to be able to reduce their carbon footprint, which is an entirely different world. What we have seen, and it starts off with basic ideas of occupancy, understanding building occupancy. Right. Yes, you could understand floor level occupancy, you could understand a cubicle level occupancy, but can you understand building occupancy? People who are across all the floors coming in and out, what's the traffic? So that trend, understand the trend is generally, you have, especially in office spaces, we've seen there is a ramp up and then there's a drop down and there's a ramp up again in the afternoon. What is that sizing that would drive HVAC controls, right? If you were able to use that and in conjunction with, let's say, the elevator usage, the number of elevators are used, the people waiting at elevators, for example, versus people using elevators. Are you oversized for elevators? There's a potential there. There's also areas of lighting, like Tyler was talking about, where being able to understand as people are walking around, do we turn on the lights? Do we increase the amount of energy usage or reduce it? So the video feeds see most of this, can be used to understand this kind of traffic in detail, come up with more accurate estimates, and not just provide numbers, but also evidence of what is happening, right? So if you, for example, had 4 people coming in, you can go back to that feed, that clip, and see what happened. Why did I have 4 people staying back in the middle of the night, for example? You can take a look at that. Who was the last person leaving my building? It gives you a sense of a combination of numbers, but also context with video. So there are some advantages there. And we've also seen examples in commercial buildings where we are looking at operations of equipment, for example, boiler rooms, heaters. Uh, these we had one example with a customer where they had an incinerator, a trash incinerator in their basement, and it actually blew up and flooded the whole basement. Now, there was a camera looking at it, and you could go back to the feed and actually see the whole thing shaking. So you could have the AI on the camera could have indicated failure preventatively or predicted an oncoming failure much more effectively to stop that level of waste and level of damage. So it's kind of unlimited, really. It's almost like having a team of people walking around a building and inspecting it. You can just take that whole context and put it on top of AI for cameras.
Yeah, I think the
Yeah.
real AI opportunity is all within context, right? I think a video feed is, of course, a very context, but energy reductions will require baselines, weather data, and just a more granular view of the space, right? That's, I think, where a lot of these IoT sensor world, right, in order to
Hmm.
power people counts in a very granular way, not by an energy bill that spans the entire building, but floor by floor, suite by suite, even space by space readings of what people counts look like. So the question is to Tyler, right? Do people really ask for this? Is this on your top 5 list of asks from customers? Is energy still top of mind?
Yeah, I think energy's, that's one of the ways you could actually quantify ROI. If you think about the CapEx spend of, obviously Deepak works more in the actual, live video feed world. We have our own proprietary sensors that are more computer vision, so they're not video live stream. But obviously those are measuring what I would call occupancy, number of people. We also use different sensors that can connect to the HVAC that are just presence space sensors. So I think if you go to the outcomes that I'm seeing is you've got one, what are the energy savings across the building? Essentially the building should be telling itself what to do based on how the people move through the building and what's happening. So ultimately, are people using these rooms? If not, we should be having these different occupancy based systems set up to either the BMS system directly or working through, different partners like a normal.dev to connect to BACnet to then adjust, where that needs to be from a heating or cooling standpoint. So different use cases come in if we think about the employee lens, right? So you go to a meeting, it holds 10 people. We'll suddenly see 14 people in the room. Well, by the time that system understands the thermostat on the wall, you're going to be an hour late. So if you can quickly see if there's 14 people and you can start cooling that room down, that's a very different experience, especially if you're, a firm who has clients and you have executive meetings. Not that all of us on the internal levels aren't just as important, but I think there's a lot to the employee side that sits there. And then traditionally ESG goals, these are massive. I mean, the carbon footprints of buildings are the biggest offenders that we have in the world. I was at a Berto 2.0 event talking about carbon in Boston not too long ago. I know there's different initiatives in Chicago and New York, but it's very interesting to see, obviously, Deepak, Europe leading the charge in a lot of this stuff. So we have more customers that seemingly are activating and asking better and deeper questions from a global customer base versus some of our folks here in the US.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought up Berto requirements here too. Those fines for noncompliance are they ramp over time. And I think that's just a policy trend, not to get too deep into, the sort of wonky world there, but that's a big part of all carbon neutral sort of municipal building laws, right? Is how they ramp over time. So it does require you to have a very granular view into what consumption looks like. And right, if you've got a target in year 1, that needs to come down considerably in year 2, 3, and onwards, right, on a path towards carbon neutrality. So it really is going to require people to pull in data like you mentioned, right? Reservations data for preconditioning, spaces. And one thing I always like to think about, right? Because I I have to, right? We build products for the people on the engineering and building management side for them to use, right? So we build trust by showing them that we're not taking over their role. We're assisting them with these set point adjustments and things like that. And as small as, right, one or two degrees and changes can result in over time, right? These 15 to 30% in energy reduction that we've seen in reports, right? So there's a tremendous opportunity there. One thing I saw in the chat here is right, envisioning a world where buildings can be more autonomous. Um, do you see, I guess, where do you see the the conversation around building autonomy, self-driving buildings, Deepak? Is this something that your customers are on a journey towards, or are we still in a much more, let's call it like an early stage of practical use cases
Oh yeah, definitely. We are not there yet.
here?
We are definitely in, early stage. I think we're still at the stage where are we able to use the data completely? We are still at the stage of being able to analyze the data autonomously. It's more like, okay, let's not talk about the actions the building can take. Let's first understand the data. Let's make sure we are comfortable with the data. Let's make sure the data is saying what we want it to say or so want it to do, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're at that stage right now. There is a significant gap between the real world and where we are actually even are today in some of the front runners. There is, so when we talk about camera video analytics, we talk about IoT sensors. We also talk about a brain that sits above all of this to make the right decisions for the building. Just integrating these three itself is where we are right now, right? So we're doing individual use cases here. We have some value, but I think bringing all of this together and having that level of AI that can make the decisions, and at least on the data analytics side, is our immediate, I think 2026, 2027 would be mostly in that area, providing value to decision makers with data that they did not see before, and they can start trusting. And I think this would lead the way to eventually to autonomous buildings, but I don't think we're there yet. Tyler,
Yeah.
I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on this as well with the analytics side.
Deepak, I think you nailed it. I think if we're a restaurant plating food, I think we're in the back kitchen with the onions cut up and all the ingredients kind of laid out on the table.
Right.
But we've got all the pieces. So even if you think about like autonomy now, like destination dispatch for ACS and elevators, that's autonomous, right? You have a scan in, the elevator comes, takes you to your floor, it knows where you're going. That can also be activated through a Cohesion app that you've obviously had. Your credentials passed through the Apple Wallet or the Android Google Pay. I think that's what it's called. So that's an autonomous experience right there. But if you think about like overall connectivity, I think about like the employee lens. That's where we work a lot in the corporate. What if we're on this call right now and the integrations are set up in a way where I say, hey, we're going to have a meeting next week. It's going to be obviously in our office. You're going to be coming here, and AI through the video is starting to pick this up. Well, suddenly I get done. The conference room's been booked for me, has the amount of folks. I talk about lunch on the call. We have an integration to, Cohesion that says, hey, we're ordering food through here. ACS credentials have already been put into place. Like that's an incredible experience that both boosts productivity and also, someone's want to come into a workplace like this. Like think about how much gets taken off your plate if a building, not just from a security and access standpoint, but an actual user standpoint, is willing to work with you. I think there's two pieces though that are getting closer together, and that is occupier and landlord. So if you think about some of these different parts, past the suite door has always been thought of as like, oh, that's the occupier. And then obviously landlord owns the base building. Then we obviously have our common areas that sit within that lease. And you think about the triple nets that impact obviously the energy usage and all those things. But if you think about how, the space is used from an energy efficiency standpoint within the occupier suite, that certainly impacts the carbon footprint for the landlord. So having that people connection of, let's make sure these systems talk, I think is really, really important. And there's a lot of value for both parties as they continue to work together.
Yeah, what a great theme, right? Of collaboration across not just our tech stack and our tech ecosystem, but really the stakeholders, right? Whether it's landlords and in your tenant suites and enterprises, being able to work together within our smart building to achieve similar goals, right? I think that's another key thing here is, right, that goal of more efficient operations, doing more with less, right? We've seen smaller teams be a big part of, the workplace trends here in the last 2 years, but also, right, working towards a carbon neutral future. I think there has to be more collaboration between landlords and their tenants and these enterprises. And I think we're entering, or at least I hope in 2026, we're entering a world in which that conversation and collaboration can be enabled through more use of smart platform products and interconnectivity in a safe and secure way, right? I'm glad, Tyler, that you brought up just the enterprise world, right? It does seem like hybrid work is here to stay. Let's talk about occupancy. How do you see occupancy analytics really helping companies design better spaces, right? Spaces that I've heard earn the commute of your employees, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like mandates and occupancy, we've been talking about this since what, 2022? I think it's a recurring theme every September. We kind of get back to this and then we go to Christmas and people forget a bit. But I do think now you're seeing a lot more companies take a much more serious approach to kind of where they're going to draw their line in the sand based on people being in the office. And I think a lot of it too is if we're going to be paying for this, like what are we getting out of this? So, if I think about different types of data, and all data is good data. It just matters on how granular you want to go by, as Deepak mentioned, building level, floor level, space type, category type, and all those different things that, we pull in insights to. But, do you have the right amount of space? Are people still right sizing? Are you optimizing what that space looks like for how the users are coming in, what the business units require out of that space? Does the space fit the needs of the workers, right? Like, what are we connecting from occupancy to booking? What's it look like for HVAC and like the comfort level of that space? So how do you better arm facilities teams and those workplace folks who actually need to activate that space has become a really big driver. I do think that I get a chuckle still when people say, oh, the offices are flooded. You look at still the data points. If you're to go into the dashboards and analytics and look at Monday and Fridays, they are minuscule compared to when everyone's trying to pack their mandate into Tuesday through Thursday across the board. What I would say is, you've seen a pretty big transformational shift on how collaboration areas are used, what it looks like with individual phone booths, right? So we see a lot of what I would call lone wolves sitting in conference rooms. So if you look at a lot of conference room utilization across different portfolios, one person is sitting in a 10-person conference room. I think that we've gotten very used to over those times during COVID at home, having the ability to do different personal things. Personal phone calls, maybe a therapy appointment, whatever we needed to do was happening there. So having the environment of which you have to go to support those different functions is extremely important. And that's why a lot of these phone booths you can't even buy anymore. They've been bought up and they're kind of placed in different areas across the board. So I don't envy any of these groups who have to put it together. So it's really a fun challenge to work with them on this. But I do think now it's not like, what is the data? It's what are we going to do with this? And let's put a plan together and let's go iterate, because think about commercial real estate. And I say, this is the last industry where these people have to go make lease decisions and also have to make different budget decisions. And they're the largest purchases in the world for the most part, unless you're going to go buy an airplane, with the least amount of data by any sector. That's a
Mm.
pretty crazy thing. If you're going to go as a leasing broker, negotiate the renewal of your floor, not having any data from an occupancy standpoint puts you in a really tough position when you think about TI money or different adjustments, changes, even from a negotiation standpoint. So I think in ROI, Chad, would you buy a Ferrari and not have a gas gauge and the different electronics to tell you how the car is performing?
Let me answer that with a maybe. But you're absolutely right, right? Like there's an expectation for transparency in performance, and whether that's whether that's an automotive or workplace, we should be making decisions based on a live feed, right? A deeper set of space analytics around utilization. And it doesn't have to only be on desks. It can be conference rooms by size. You mentioned phone booths before, but we have to be making decisions for these very large leases based on something that's real. So,
And I'd be curious Deepak's perspective, because we take an approach like, what's the problem? You don't need a sensor everywhere. Like maybe you just need to know how many people are coming to the floor versus through your ACS. right? Or which floor they're going to. I think people too often just jump at, we need this, this, and this, where it's like, you really only needed about 10% of that, especially from a budget spend to solve the problem. So I think those are the fun conversations we're kind of getting back to. But I'm curious, Deepak's
Yeah,
feedback.
yeah. I mean, we because we are analytics focused, and I think you mentioned this earlier, Tyler, and you were bang on target there. It's really about outcomes, really trying to understand what you're trying to do, right? And there are different levels of what people are trying to do. If you're just trying to understand occupancy trends, that's one question. But if you're trying to understand the experience of the tenants, that's a different question. Now, you could quantify a portion of the experience with occupancy, but you need to go beyond that. You need to see what they're doing. You need to classify their actions. For example, we were deployed in a building, in a commercial building with some sort of breakfast bar, and there were occupancy numbers that we showed in the bar and the lounge. But what was interesting was when we classified what they were doing, they were actually working there. That's all they were doing. They were working. So you could argue that if I just gave the occupancy numbers, yeah, the restaurant's doing great, but guess what? You're actually losing space because people are just sitting with their laptops. So that's a different question. So again, it's all about outcomes and asking, okay, then the other outcome could be, is the room correctly sized? Are you actually using what is in the room, and are you just walking around? There are different approaches we take from a solution standpoint, but the process always remains the same. Understand what business outcomes we are looking for, backtrack that with data that we can generate.
Yeah. From
Yeah.
a design perspective, the cost of these build outs too is tremendous, right? I think there are always going to be this feeling that we should have, if we have an office that we can call our headquarters and so on and so forth, that we should have a showcase space, right? These larger boardrooms and conference rooms that are fully amenitized. And those are, in reality, those are really expensive to find, not just the square footage from a floor plate to build out, but to furnish, to add all of the AV equipment and things like that. Having a very granular understanding of how your space is utilized by type can really influence the decisions that you make as companies grow and enter new leases and design their spaces not just to be trophies, right, but to also make the most sense for their employees, right? After all, this is where they're going to be most productive, and you really want to make sure that that you're satisfying all of their needs there. One thing that we saw, right, just with through sensors, is we were performing some desk analysis, and we were seeing people counts at a single desk that were like fours and fives, and you would intuitively think this could be anomalous, but what we were seeing was people huddling around and, right, collaborating if there was no collaboration space, right? Huddling around, a group of monitors to sort of have your daily stand-ups or check in on a slide deck and things like this. So when we were sort of validating this by walking floors and understanding how the space is being used, we clocked it, and it was this was something that maybe we could have found via video, right? We could have sort of classified that use case through some historical analysis, but partnered with the sensor data feed, I think you've got a tremendous view into how space is being used by the people who
Mhm.
have spent all that time commuting to get into your space. So yeah, I think hybrid's here to stay, and the more we have, the happier employees will end up. Now, if we can sort of pivot into maybe a few maintenance use cases, because I think these are fantastic, right? Nothing upsets an employee more than too hot, too cold spaces or spills that go unaddressed, and everyone wants to be very comfortable when they're in their workplace. So I think today we've seen a lot of conversations around predictive maintenance using historical maintenance records and understanding those patterns to sort of say, hey, there's going to be another, you need to change a filter, or, it seems like about every 3 weeks you have to service a thing in a kitchen, right? I think AI can provide more data here to cover janitorial scheduling right by these detailed zones. So going beyond that, there's incident reporting, right? To make sure that your workplace is safe. Deepak, have you seen any interesting use cases? I think you and I were talking about this automated sort of incident reporting and automated work orders. What have you seen in a few different examples there?
Right. So again, it's really important for employees to work in clean spaces, right? Clean and well taken care of spaces. And most companies have third-party cleaning services. They may have internal cleaning services, a combination of both. And what we have done, we have looked at multiple buildings where we are able to provide detailed reports of foot traffic versus cleaning patterns. So if you think about it, why do you clean? Because you have foot traffic, you have some incident or some sort of dirt, or you are on a schedule, right? So both of these are observed by cameras. Cameras can tell if a cleaning has happened on time, on schedule, can also tell if there was a necessity for a second cleaning because somebody dropped a Coke cup or somebody left something back behind that they shouldn't have. So both of these are almost automated reporting back to the planning team, the team that plans the cleaning and the janitorial services to engage a more efficient real-time view of keeping the places clean. And this is something we have seen work very effectively because what happens is in reality, as humans consume this data, as it comes, the planner now and the facilities and the cleaning teams have more information about what needs to be prioritized. And we've also gone one step ahead to, in fact, provide information about the actual usage patterns within that space to say, hey, somebody spent a lot of time by this window on this chair. Make sure you walk past that, right? You may not have done it normally, but you may want to spend a little bit more time looking at it more in detail because there's a red spot here for some reason. And what it eventually does is it makes things more efficient. The payback is pretty clear because now you don't have to increase your cleaning services or the cleaning services size just because you have a larger building. You can prioritize more efficiently. You can also keep the place clean constantly, which would make any worker happy because they're always sitting in a clean space.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm in the office today, but the two of you are appearing to work from home. So I will hear to that sentiment. So I'd love to spend maybe the last 10 minutes of our call today, just like helping folks, audience here on the feed, be better at asking the right questions, preparing themselves to invest in smart building technology, right? So what are some of the privacy concerns that you've seen and really how do you address them in the IoT space, at least? Tyler, I'll start with you and then Deepak, I'd love your answer as well.
It's a good question. I think in the corporate space, we have an optical sensor. So the word optical is not camera; it's more computer vision. It's to firmware. All the brains sit within the gateway, and the AI essentially is analyzing what that blurred image it has looks like, and it's dumped on prem. So we have a variety of from an occupancy standpoint, a variety of different pen tests at the gateway level, GDPR compliance, kind of all those different things. That's anonymizing what that looks like and what that shows up as. But even so, there are instances where people are not wanting to go that route. So that's where you have different sensors, whether it be IRs, you have different LiDAR type sensors. There's different inputs that can be used. What I'm seeing quite a bit of now is, we have a variety of different AV equipment that has people counts within conference rooms. A lot of it's not quite as accurate as a sensor. There's some different visibility and just how it sees the room are a little bit different. But if you're already paying for it, that might be good enough. So let's start to pull in that data, but we also just have to understand what's the compliance look like and how you're going to actually take this data and how you're going to analyze it. So Deepak, I'm sure you see this when you think about like a corporate company and the overall employee list. Like, how are you matching that data up on the back end? If you're ingesting HR data at the people level, and then you're matching area types or categories or assigned desks, suddenly that data set becomes very different, right? Because Chad, I know that you're sitting in front of your fancy whiteboard every day and your name is Chad versus being a person. So each company has their own policies, and InfoSec security review is a really big one that we often go really deep on to make sure whatever we're trying to prescribe for how we collect the data meets their standards with what we're trying to achieve. But that's where I always go back to, what are we trying to solve for? If we don't care how many people are in a room that fits 6 or less, why are we even talking about an optical sensor, right? Let's just use an IR sensor. So I think that's where a lot of those questions up front really help save a lot of people time in the process to to prescribe a solution.
Yeah, and just a quick follow-up there, right? I think also there's there's going to be I mentioned flexibility of deploying sensors and things like that. There's going to be, right, a need to evaluate if you're going to be leveraging network connectivity or cellular based sensors, right? There's so many different ways to sort of acquire that data in a very secure way. You want to have a really healthy conversation with your sort of networking team and even your integrators. Sometimes these, right, all of these things get performed through integrators. Ask those questions ahead of time so that you're prepared to evaluate what your sensor options are based on use case. And Tyler, you made a very political statement around, getting people counts, but I will tell you, as I evaluate a lot of them every day, that not all the sensors are sort of created equal here. It is important to understand where the data is coming from, how it's being acquired, right? There's a lot of different ways to do that, right? You mentioned optical versus heat versus other things. So just asking a few extra questions on how that data is getting read in, and then if it's going to be available, right, as a data platform, the simple connectivity to a cloud-based platform is fantastic. Or sort of APIs that can provide you with data from an analytics purpose. I think 15 minutes, 5 minutes are fine, but it really depends on use case, right? Sometimes you're going to need a lot more of a live feed, 1 minute grains, sub-minute grains to ensure that you can kick off the automations that you're looking to perform within a smart building. So few things to consider here. Deepak, do you want to just
Yeah.
share with us a little bit more about, some of the privacy items that you address when customers are learning about video analytics?
Yeah, I mean, privacy is a big one, right? Because it's video. So
Yeah.
it's as non-private as it gets. There are two layers to this. One is we keep away from biometrics, and just from a baby step standpoint, it's not something that we cannot do, but we just don't offer it today, and we don't have it as a part of our stack because we're still at that stage of analytics where most of the outcomes don't need that level of personal information. So to that effect, what we do is we blur out the faces in our pipeline. We make sure we do not store any attribute or facial data. That's one. Two, we're using the cameras they already have. We're not putting out new cameras. They already seen this. They already have stored it. It's sitting down there in the basement. It's anybody can pull it up on their mobile. They have the camera feed. We're not doing anything different from what they already have. Some of the requirements we've seen from more security-focused firms is to keep the data on-prem, which is one of our deployment methods. So we run everything on-prem. We keep everything on-prem. So just beside their existing camera storage, we have the AI storage. So it's just the same thing as before. So it doesn't change any rules that they already have. And because we anonymize the data, we are now able to be GDPR compliant, which makes us, there's really nothing we are adding to what they already don't have. They have everything. We're just doing exactly the same thing. All we're doing is classifying it from an action standpoint and account standpoint. That's all we're doing. And we're just integrating that with their business processes. So that's how we've actually dealt with the privacy concern. Of course, if we started doing facial data, if we started doing identification of people, if we started not doing on-prem storage, not anonymizing the data, yes, all of these would really stand out. But again, depends on the appetite of the customer and the problem they're trying to solve. If they're trying to solve counting, I really don't need facial data.
No.
If you're trying to solve, hey, what are the people doing? Are they sitting in a huddle? Are they using the machine? Are they walking around? What's their circulation across? I don't need the name of the person, right? I don't even need to know who that person was by any means. So we just keep away from it. I think that's the simplest strategy. We just don't do it. And we've been okay till now. There's nothing really that customers have asked that I need to have personal information.
Yeah. That's
Chad,
good. That's good to know. Yeah. Tyler.
the thing I would say is that it's interesting. I think everyone sees the word occupancy data and they think immediately about themselves. Like, are they tracking me? Are they looking at my job? Or, all these pieces, it's like a fear-based thing. It's like, oh, the majority is just to help actually build a better space and actually to help the employee to do better things with them. And also I'd say the same as a landlord. When people come in a building, like you want to create the best experience because that drives the best tenant and obviously the highest rent and all those different things. So, I think that's a misconception for a lot of people who see these technologies as big brother, where, at the end of the day, they have your IP address on your computer. if you're tied into the Wi-Fi, you're in the office, they know where you're at. Like, you have an ACS, you have a badge, like all those things are already taken care of if they really want to see it. I mean, people can track how much you're typing during the day if they really want to go
Yeah,
into that. So,
right.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's more about you and the company and the management staff that you choose to work for. Whereas I think a lot of this is much more driven towards what's the value that we can kind of come together as both technology partners and operators to bring a better experience.
Yeah, and I think there's no employee that doesn't agree with that, right? Like when it comes down to operating a more energy efficient way, right? Carbon savings, we've seen the results of surveys where employees really do want to participate in ways that to support their company being more green, right? So I think all of the incentives are aligned, especially when it comes to comfort and safety and health and efficiency within a workplace. Yeah, I think the opportunity that's presented itself here in smart buildings and an AI driven, smart building future, will help continue on that journey. And I just want to say we're here at the hour. I want to thank you for participating in this conversation with us here in, High Rise AI. Deepak, thank you. Tyler, thank you. Please do to the audience members, thank you so much for joining. Follow us, follow Moii.ai and Avuity on LinkedIn, as well as Cohesion on LinkedIn. And maybe we'll be back to have a follow-up conversation around talking AI in real estate. So thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your day.